Millionaire's daughter made every nanny cry until the new girl did the impossible. Want more stories that feel like they were made just for you? Like, subscribe, and you won't miss a single one. The paintbrush hit Tessa Brooks square in the face before she even crossed the threshold. Red paint dripped down her cheek as she stood frozen in the marble foyer of the Montgomery mansion. Above her, perched on the grand staircase like a tiny vengeful queen, 9-year-old Isla Montgomery smirked with the satisfaction of a predator who'd just claimed fresh prey. "Another one to break," Isla announced, her voice carrying the cold calculation of someone far older than her years. But Tessa didn't run. She didn't scream. She didn't even wipe the pain away. Instead, she looked up at the little girl whose reputation had sent 17 nannies fleeing in terror, and she smiled. "Nice aim," Tessa said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But I bet you can't hit a moving target." Isla's smirk faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. The game had changed. 24 hours earlier, Tessa had been sitting in the sterile waiting room of Montgomery Holdings, clutching her resume with sweaty palms. She'd heard the whispers about the Montgomery job. Every nanny in the city knew the stories. Sarah Mitchell lasted 3 days before Isla locked her in the wine cellar during a dinner party. The fire department had to break her out. Jennifer Walsh made it exactly 4 hours before Isla convinced her that the house was haunted, complete with staged, paranormal activity that left Jennifer sobbing in her car. And then there was Rebecca Stone. Poor Rebecca lasted 2 weeks, a record, before Isla's final prank sent her to the emergency room with a sprained wrist and a nervous breakdown. The salary was astronomical. $50,000 for what should have been a $30,000 job. Desperation money. Blood money, some called it. But Tessa needed it. Her mother's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves, and her degree in child psychology wasn't exactly opening doors in this economy. She'd been working 3 part-time jobs just to keep her head above water, and when the Montgomery opportunity appeared on the placement agency's urgent board, she knew it was her only shot at something better. The butler who interviewed her, a stern man named Charles with kind eyes, had been brutally honest. "Miss Brooks, I feel obligated to warn you. Isla is challenging. Since her mother passed 2 years ago, she's become increasingly difficult to manage. Mr. Montgomery travels extensively for business, and Isla has effectively scared away every caregiver we've hired." Tessa had nodded, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I understand. I've worked with traumatized children before." Charles had given her a look that seemed to say, "Not like this one. You haven't." He was right. Standing in that foyer with paint dripping down her face, Tessa made a split-second decision that would change everything. She wiped the paint with the back of her hand, looked directly at Isla, and began to move, not toward the exit like every other nanny, but deeper into the house. "You're not running away?" Isla called out, her voice betraying the first hint of uncertainty. "Should I be?" Tessa replied, still walking, forcing Isla to follow her down the stairs if she wanted to continue their conversation. Isla appeared at the bottom of the staircase, paintbrush still in hand, her dark eyes, so much like her father's, Tessa would later learn, studying this strange new adversary with growing interest. "Everyone else runs," Isla said matter-of-factly. Jennifer cried. Rebecca screamed. Sarah wet herself. "Sounds like you're pretty good at this," Tessa acknowledged, settling herself on the bottom step. "How long have you been practicing?" The question caught Isla off guard. Most adults either cowered in fear or launched into lectures about behavior. No one had ever asked about her methods like she was discussing a hobby. "Since the 3rd nanny," Isla admitted, curiosity overriding caution. "That's when I realized they were all the same. Weak." "And what made you realize that?" Isla's expression darkened, and for a moment, Tessa glimpsed something raw and broken beneath the calculated cruelty. "Because they all promised they'd stay, and they all left anyway." There it was, the wound beneath the weapon. Tessa nodded slowly. "So you decided to make them leave faster. Get it over with before it could hurt." Isla's grip tightened on the paintbrush. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right," Tessa agreed. "But I know something about being left behind. And I know something about building walls so high that nobody can climb them." For the first time since Tessa had arrived, Isla was completely silent. "Here's what I'm thinking," Tessa continued, pulling out her phone and setting a timer. "You've got the rest of today to throw everything you've got at me. Every trick, every trap, every terrible thing you can think of. But if I'm still here when this timer goes off at 6 p.m., we try something different. Deal. Isla's eyes narrowed. What kind of different? The kind where maybe we stop pretending we're enemies and start figuring out how to be on the same side. Isla stared at her for a long moment, then slowly extended her paint-covered hand. Deal. But you won't make it to 6. Tessa shook the small hand, her own now stained with red paint. We'll see. The first test came within minutes. Isla led Tessa on what she called the tour, which was actually an elaborate obstacle course of psychological torture disguised as a house walkthrough. This is the music room, Isla announced sweetly, opening a door to reveal a pristine white piano covered in family photos. Mommy used to play here. She died because the doctors were stupid. Most nannies would have either offered empty condolences or tried to change the subject. Tessa didn't either. That must have been terrifying, she said simply. Being surrounded by adults who were supposed to help and watching them fail. Isla's carefully constructed mask slipped for just a moment. They said she'd get better. They lied. Adults lie sometimes. Usually because they're scared too. Are you scared of me? Isla asked, her voice carrying both hope and challenge. A little, Tessa admitted honestly. But not because I think you're bad. I'm scared because I can see how much you're hurting, and I don't know if I'm good enough to help. It was the first completely honest thing any adult had said to Isla in 2 years, and the effect was immediate. Tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them, and she quickly turned away, angry at herself for the moment of vulnerability. The kitchen is this way, she said roughly, back to playing tour guide. But Tessa had seen the crack in the armor, and she filed it away for later. The kitchen test was more straightforward. Isla had prepositioned a bucket of ice water above the door. Tessa walked directly into it, gasping as the shock of cold water hit her. Gotcha, Isla crowed, expecting anger or tears. Instead, Tessa laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh that echoed through the massive kitchen. Okay, that was actually pretty good. How long did it take you to set that up? 2 hours, Isla admitted proudly. 2 hours of engineering for 3 seconds of payoff. I'm impressed. Tessa wrung out her soaked hair. What's next? Isla blinked. The nannies were supposed to be upset by now. They were supposed to be questioning their life choices and calculating how quickly they could escape. They weren't supposed to be interested. You're weird, Isla declared. Thank you, Tessa replied. I try to be. As the day wore on, Isla's tests became more elaborate and increasingly desperate. She led Tessa through a haunted house scenario complete with hidden speakers and remote-controlled moving objects. She orchestrated a fake emergency call that brought the fire department to the house. She even enlisted the help of Charles, though the butler's participation was clearly reluctant. Each time, Tessa responded with curiosity rather than fear, appreciation for Isla's creativity rather than anger at her destruction. It was driving Isla absolutely crazy. Why won't you just quit? Isla finally exploded as they stood in the wreckage of what had once been the formal dining room. I glued all the chairs to the ceiling. I filled your purse with fake spiders. I convinced you that the house was about to be fumigated for termites. Because, Tessa said, surveying the chaos with the air of an art critic examining a gallery. This is the most elaborate cry for help I've ever seen, and I'm not about to walk away from a kid who's working this hard to be seen. Isla's face crumpled. I don't want help. I want everyone to leave me alone. No, you don't, Tessa said gently. You want someone to care enough to stay despite everything you throw at them. You want someone to prove that you're worth fighting for. That's stupid, Isla whispered, but her voice broke on the words. Maybe, but it's also human. The timer on Tessa's phone chose that moment to go off. 6 p.m. exactly. Isla stared at the phone, then at Tessa, then back at the phone. You stayed. I told you I would. But nobody stays. Tessa knelt down until she was at eye level with the little girl. Isla, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your mom died, and that was horrible and unfair and not your fault. Your dad checked out because he doesn't know how to handle his own grief, let alone yours. And a parade of strangers came through here, making promises they couldn't keep because they didn't understand what they were signing up for. Isla nodded, tears streaming down her face. But I'm not them. I'm not here because I need a job. Well, okay, I do need a job, but I'm not here because this is easy money or because I think you're some project I can fix. I'm here because I see a brilliant, creative, fiercely protective little girl who's been abandoned by the adults who were supposed to take care of her. And that makes me angry. Not at you, for you. You're angry for me? Isla asked in a small voice. Furious, Tessa confirmed. You deserve better. You deserve better. And if you'll let me, I'd like to try to give that to you. Isla was quiet for a long moment, processing words she'd never heard before. Finally, she looked up at Tessa with eyes that seemed decades older than 9. What happens now? Now we clean up this dining room together, and then we figure out what comes next. Together? Together. The next few weeks were a careful dance of boundaries and breakthroughs. Isla continued to test, but the tests evolved from pure destruction to elaborate games. Instead of trying to drive Tessa away, she seemed to be testing whether Tessa would stick around even when things got complicated. There was the morning Isla decided to redecorate Tessa's room by covering every surface with her artwork, some beautiful, some clearly designed to shock. Instead of being upset, Tessa spent an hour examining each piece, asking questions about technique and inspiration. This one's really dark, she commented on a particularly violent scene of stick figures. Tell me about it. It's the day Mommy went to the hospital and didn't come back, Isla said matter-of-factly. All those stick figures look scared. They are. The little one especially. The little one is you. Isla nodded. Where's your dad in this picture? Isla pointed to a figure that was notably distant from the others, facing away. He was on the phone. Always on the phone. Tessa studied the drawing more carefully. You know what I notice? Even though everyone looks scared, they're all still in the same picture. Still connected somehow. I guess. That takes courage. Staying in the picture even when you're scared. It was a small moment, but Isla filed it away. There was also the incident with the elaborate Rube Goldberg machine Isla constructed to dump flour on Tessa when she opened the front door. The contraption was so ingenious that Tessa spent 20 minutes covered in flour, marveling at the engineering involved. Isla, this is incredible. How did you calculate the timing on this pulley system? YouTube, Isla admitted proudly. Show me. They spent the afternoon watching engineering videos together, Isla explaining the principles she'd learned and Tessa asking increasingly complex questions. It was the first time in months that Isla had shared something she was passionate about with an adult, and the first time anyone had treated her intelligence as something to be celebrated rather than feared. But the real breakthrough came on a Thursday evening when Tessa found Isla crying in the music room, clutching one of her mother's photographs. Bad day? Tessa asked gently, settling beside her on the piano bench. It's her birthday, Isla whispered. Mommy's birthday. Daddy forgot. He's in Tokyo, and he forgot. Tessa's heart broke a little more. That must feel terrible. I tried to call him, but his assistant said he was in meetings. On your mom's birthday. He probably doesn't even remember what day it is anymore. Tessa was quiet for a moment, then asked, What would your mom have wanted to do today? Isla looked up, surprised by the question. She'd want to play piano. She always played on her birthday. The same song every year. Do you know the song? Isla nodded, her fingers moving unconsciously to the keys. But I'm not supposed to play her piano. Daddy said it was too precious. What do you think your mom would say about that? Isla considered this. She'd say pianos are made for playing, not looking at. Smart woman. Slowly, hesitantly, Isla began to play. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, Debussy's Clair de Lune. And even with a few missed notes, it filled the room with something that had been missing for too long, life. When she finished, both she and Tessa were crying. She would have loved that, Tessa said softly. You think so? I know so. That was beautiful, Isla. You kept something precious alive today. That night, for the first time since Tessa had arrived, Isla left something outside her bedroom door. Not a prank or a trap, a blanket. Soft and well-worn, clearly a childhood favorite. Tessa understood the message. I trust you enough to share something that matters to me. She knocked softly on Isla's door. Thank you for the blanket. Would you like to keep me company for a while? We could talk, or just sit quietly. Isla opened the door, eyes red from crying. Would you tell me about your mom? They talked until almost midnight, sharing stories and memories. And when Isla finally fell asleep, it was curled up next to Tessa on the too small bedroom chair, the borrowed blanket covering them both. Graham Montgomery returned home on a Tuesday morning without warning, as was his habit. He preferred to catch his household off guard, to see how things really operated in his absence. What he found in his backyard that morning stopped him cold. There was his daughter, his complicated, brilliant, impossible daughter, learning to ride a bicycle. And not just any bicycle, but the pink two-wheeler with streamers and a bell that had been gathering dust in the garage since her 6th birthday. The bike he'd promised to teach her to ride before work consumed his life and grief consumed his heart. But it wasn't the bike that made him freeze behind the French doors. It was the sound of Isla's laughter. High and clear and completely unguarded, it rang across the garden like music he'd forgotten existed. When had he last heard her laugh? Really laugh, not the sharp, bitter sound she made when one of her pranks succeeded, but this, pure joy. You're doing it. You're actually doing it. Tessa called out, jogging alongside the bike with one hand hovering protectively near Isla's back. Don't let go. Isla shrieked, but she was grinning widely. I'm not letting go. I've got you. Promise. Promise. And then, as Graham watched through the glass, Tessa did let go. But she did it so gradually, so naturally, that Isla didn't even notice until she was pedaling freely across the lawn, her laughter mixing with the morning air. Look, Tessa. I'm doing it. You're flying. Tessa confirmed, her own face bright with pride and joy. Graham felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept carefully sealed for 2 years. Because watching his daughter's triumph, he could almost see Elena beside him, could almost hear her whispered, "She's perfect, isn't she?" But the moment shattered when Isla spotted him through the glass. The bike wobbled to a stop. The laughter died, and the careful distance that had become their normal relationship slammed back into place like a steel door. "Daddy," Isla said flatly. "You're home." "I am." He stepped outside, his business mask firmly in place. "I see you've learned to ride." "Tessa taught me." Graham's eyes found Tessa for the first time, really looked at her. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe mid-20s, with kind eyes and grass stains on her knees from running alongside the bike. She looked like someone who cared about his daughter, and that scared him more than any of Isla's previous nannies had. "Miss Brooks, I presume." "Mr. Montgomery. Welcome home. I wasn't aware bicycle lessons were part of your job description." The words came out sharper than he'd intended, and he saw Tessa's expression shift slightly. Not hurt, exactly, but disappointed. "Neither was I," Tessa replied evenly. But Islam mentioned she wanted to learn, and it seemed like a good way to spend the morning. "I see." Graham looked at his daughter, who was watching this exchange with the wary tension of someone expecting a fight. "Isla, why don't you go get cleaned up? I need to speak with Miss Brooks." Isla's face fell. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. Just go wash your hands." After Isla disappeared into the house, Graham turned to Tessa with the same expression he used in hostile business negotiations. "Miss Brooks, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I have specific expectations for my daughter's care. Outdoor activities without proper safety equipment, for instance." She was wearing a helmet. Tessa interrupted quietly. "I didn't see. It's right there on the garden table, along with knee pads and elbow pads. I'm not reckless with her safety, Mr. Montgomery." Graham paused, slightly deflated. "I see. Well, perhaps in the future you could check with me before introducing new activities." "Of course, though it might be helpful if you were available to check with." The words hung in the air between them, polite but pointed. Graham felt his jaw tighten. "I work very hard to provide for my daughter, Miss Brooks." "I'm sure you do. But providing isn't the same as being present." "Excuse me." Tessa took a breath, and Graham could see her choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Montgomery, Isla is an incredible kid. She's brilliant and creative and funny and so much stronger than anyone her age should have to be. But she's also 9 years old, and she's been essentially raising herself for 2 years while processing grief that would challenge most adults. I've given her everything. Except yourself." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Graham's instinct was to fire her on the spot, to shut down this conversation before it could go any deeper. But something in Tessa's expression stopped him. She wasn't attacking him. She was pleading with him. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said finally. "Maybe not. But I know that your daughter spent your wife's birthday crying alone in the music room because you forgot what day it was. I know she's convinced herself that everyone she cares about will eventually leave her, so she tries to drive them away first to control the timing. And I know that 5 minutes ago, she was the happiest I've ever seen her, until you walked outside and she remembered that happiness isn't safe in this house." Graham felt like he'd been punched. "That's enough." "Is it?" Because from where I'm standing, it's nowhere near enough. Isla needs more than financial security and a safe house and someone to manage her schedule. She needs her father. I think, Graham said carefully, that we should discuss your employment status. Tessa nodded, her expression sad but unsurprised. If you want me to go, I'll go. But before I do, you should know something. Your daughter is the strongest person I've ever met. She survived losing her mother, being emotionally abandoned by her father, and having 17 different caregivers cycle through her life. She survived all of that, and she's still capable of joy and trust and love. That's extraordinary. She paused, meeting his eyes directly. But she shouldn't have to be that strong. She's 9 years old, Mr. Montgomery. She should be worried about homework and playground politics, not whether the people she cares about are going to disappear. So if you fire me, fine. But please, for her sake, try to show up. Try to be her dad and not just her provider. Because she's amazing, and she deserves to have at least one parent who sees that. With that, Tessa walked toward the house, leaving Graham alone in the garden with thoughts he'd been avoiding for 2 years. That evening, Graham found himself standing outside Isla's bedroom door, hand raised to knock, but frozen with uncertainty. When had he become a stranger in his own daughter's life? When had the simple act of talking to her become so complicated? He was still debating whether to knock when Isla's door opened. "I know you're out there, Daddy," she said quietly. The floorboard squeaks. "Right. May I come in?" Isla shrugged and returned to her desk, where she was working on something with intense concentration. Graham entered her room. Really entered it, not just peered in from the doorway, for the first time in months. It was like stepping into a museum of childhood. Art supplies covered every surface. Books were stacked in precarious towers. Science experiments in various stages of completion occupied an entire shelf. And covering nearly every inch of wall space were drawings. Hundreds of them, ranging from stick figures to surprisingly sophisticated sketches. "You've been busy," he said, genuinely impressed despite himself. "Tessa says I should draw my feelings when I can't find words for them." That sounds like good advice." Isla looked up at him suspiciously. "Are you going to fire her?" Graham sat on the edge of her bed, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know. She's not like the others." "No, she's not. She stayed when I threw paint at her, and when I put fake spiders in her purse, and when I told her the house was haunted. You did all that, and more. But she never got scared of me. She got scared for me. There's a difference." Graham stared at his daughter, struck by the wisdom in her observation. "When did you get so smart?" "I was always smart. You just stopped noticing." The casual brutality of her honesty took his breath away. "Isla, it's okay, Daddy. I know you miss Mommy too much to see anything else." "That's not." He stopped, because it was true, wasn't it? For 2 years, his grief had been so consuming that everything else had faded into background noise, including his daughter. "I miss her too," Isla continued, returning to her drawing. "But I'm still here. I know you are, sweetheart. I'm sorry I haven't been. I haven't been a very good father lately." Lately, Isla's smile was sad but not unkind. "Daddy, you haven't been a father at all. You've been a very sad man who happens to live in the same house as me." The words should have hurt. They did hurt. But they also felt like a relief, to finally name the thing they'd both been dancing around. "I don't know how to do this without her," Graham admitted. "Your mother was the one who knew about feelings and conversations and being a parent. I was just the backup. So learn. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Graham struggled to explain. "Because every time I look at you, I see her. You have her eyes, her expressions, her laugh. And it hurts too much." Isla was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her latest drawing and handed it to him. It was a family portrait, but not like any Graham had seen. Instead of the typical side-by-side figures, this one showed a complex web of connections. Elena was in the center, drawn in bright colors, with lines extending to both Graham and Isla. But there were other figures too, Charles and several previous nannies. And, "Is that Tessa?" Graham asked, pointing to a figure near Isla. She's part of us now." "Isla, she might not be staying. She will if you let her. She's not scared of broken things, Daddy. She's good at fixing them." Graham studied the drawing more carefully. It was remarkably sophisticated for a 9-year-old's work, but what struck him wasn't the artistic skill, it was the emotional intelligence. Every figure was connected to every other figure in some way. creating a network of relationships rather than a simple family tree. This is beautiful, sweetheart. I made it for Tessa, to show her that she belongs here. What makes you think she belongs here? Isla gave him a look that was pure exasperation. Because she sees me, Daddy. Really sees me. Not the bad parts that need to be fixed or the scary parts that need to be managed. She sees all of me, and she likes what she sees. And that's important to you. It's everything. Isla's voice was small but fierce. Do you know what it's like when everyone who's supposed to take care of you looks at you like you're a problem to be solved? When the person who's supposed to love you most can't even look at you without flinching. Graham felt the words hit home with devastating accuracy. Isla, I'm not mommy, she continued, tears starting to fall. I know I'm not. I know I can't replace her or make you feel better or be enough to make you want to be here. But I'm still me, and I'm still yours, and I need you to see me. Graham was off the bed and pulling her into his arms before he'd consciously decided to move. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing with the force of 2 years' worth of held-back pain. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry, baby girl. You're right. You're absolutely right. I haven't been seeing you, and that's not your fault. It's mine. I've been so lost and missing mommy that I forgot I still have you. I missed you too. Isla hiccuped against his chest. I missed having a daddy. They held each other for a long time, letting 2 years of distance and misunderstanding wash away in shared tears. Finally, Isla pulled back to look at him. Are you going to fire Tessa? Graham looked at the drawing in his hands, at the careful way Isla had positioned Tessa within their family constellation, and made a decision. No, sweetheart. I think maybe it's time I had a different conversation with her. Tessa was packing when Graham found her the next morning. Her suitcase was open on the bed, clothes folded with military precision, and she moved with the efficient sadness of someone who'd done this before. You don't have to leave, he said from the doorway. Tessa looked up, surprised. I thought you'd decided. I decided I was an ass. My daughter helped me reach that conclusion. Despite everything, Tessa smiled. She's very wise. Too wise. And too strong. And too alone. Graham stepped into the room, hands in his pockets, suddenly awkward. I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. Mr. Montgomery. Graham, please. And before you say anything, I need you to know that Isla showed me her drawing last night. The family portrait with you in it. Tessa's expression softened. She worked very hard on that. She told me she made it to show you that you belong here. Is that true? She's a very generous kid. That's not what I asked. Tessa paused in her packing, considering her words. Your daughter has an extraordinary capacity for love, despite everything she's been through. If she thinks I belong here, it's because she needs to believe that someone will choose to stay. And will you? Stay, I mean. That depends. On what? Tessa closed her suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed, meeting his eyes directly. On whether you're asking me to stay as Isla's nanny or as part of something bigger. I'm not sure I follow. Isla doesn't need a nanny, Graham. She needs a family. She needs stability and consistency and adults who show up emotionally, not just physically. She needs to know that the people in her life are invested in her well-being, not just her safety. Graham nodded slowly. And you think I haven't been doing that? I think you've been doing the best you could while drowning in your own grief. But I also think Isla deserves better than survival mode. So what are you proposing? Tessa took a breath. I'm proposing that if I stay, it's not as hired help. It's as someone who's genuinely committed to this family's healing. Someone who has a say in decisions about Isla's care and education and emotional development. Someone who's here because she chooses to be, not because she's being paid to be. That sounds like you're asking to be more than an employee. I'm asking to be trusted with something precious. And I'm asking you to show up as Isla's father, not just her provider. Graham was quiet for a long moment, processing the enormity of what she was asking. The salary. Keep your money. Well, okay, I need some money. I have bills, but don't make this about compensation. Make it about commitment. What kind of commitment? The kind where we're all in this together. Where we make decisions as a team. Where Isla knows that the adults in her life are talking to each other and working toward the same goals. Where she feels safe enough to be a kid instead of having to be strong all the time. Graham studied her face, looking for any sign of uncertainty or hidden agenda. He found neither. You really care about her, he said finally. I love her, Tessa replied simply. She's extraordinary, and she deserves to know that. Even after everything she put you through? Especially after everything she put me through. Do you have any idea how much courage it takes to keep testing people's love? She's been trying to find someone who won't break, and every time someone failed her test, she got a little more convinced that she was unlovable. But she kept trying anyway. That's not bratty behavior. That's hope refusing to die. Graham felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the tight control he'd maintained for so long. What would you need from me? Your presence, your attention, your willingness to learn how to be her father again. I don't know if I remember how. Then we'll figure it out together. Graham looked around the room, at the packed suitcase, at Tessa's careful posture, at the hope and determination in her expression, and made the second important decision in 12 hours. Unpack, he said. Graham, unpack, and let's go have breakfast with my daughter. And then maybe you can help me figure out how to be the kind of father she deserves. Tessa's smile was radiant. I'd like that very much. The next few months were a careful experiment in healing. Graham cut his travel schedule in half, then in half again, learning to delegate responsibilities he'd previously insisted on handling personally. It wasn't easy. His company had been his refuge from grief, the one place where he felt competent and in control. But watching Isla's face light up when he walked through the door at 6 p.m. instead of 10 made every difficult conversation with his board worthwhile. Tessa proved to be a master at creating opportunities for connection. She instituted family dinners, insisted on weekend activities, and somehow made it feel natural when Graham found himself sitting on Isla's bedroom floor, helping with homework or listening to stories about her day. Daddy, did you know that octopi have 3 hearts? Isla announced one evening over dinner. Octopi isn't actually the correct plural, Graham replied automatically. It's octopuses or octopodes. Graham, Tessa said gently. He paused, realizing he'd just corrected his daughter instead of engaging with her excitement. But 3 hearts is fascinating. Tell me more about that. Isla's face brightened. Well, 2 of them pump blood to the gills, and 1 pumps blood to the rest of the body. And when they swim, the main heart stops beating, so they get tired really fast. That's why they mostly crawl along the bottom. That's incredible. How did you learn about that? Tessa and I watched a documentary about ocean animals. Did you know that some octopuses can change not just their color, but their texture too? They can make their skin look like rocks or coral or seaweed. Graham found himself genuinely interested, drawn into his daughter's enthusiasm in a way he hadn't been in years. That sounds like the ultimate camouflage. It is. But Tessa says the most amazing thing about octopuses is that they're really smart, but they only live for a few years. So they have to learn everything super fast. What do you think about that? Tessa asked. Isla considered this seriously. I think it's sad that they don't get very long, but maybe that makes them appreciate the time they have more. The observation hit Graham with unexpected force. How much time had he wasted being absent from his daughter's life? How many moments like this had he missed while hiding in conference rooms and business trips? That's very wise, sweetheart, he said quietly. After dinner, as they cleaned up together, another Tessa innovation, Isla turned to him with the careful expression she wore when she had something important to say. Daddy, are you happy that Tessa stayed? Graham glanced at Tessa, who was pretending to be very focused on loading the dishwasher. Yes, I am. Are you? Very happy. She makes everything better. How so? Isla thought about this. She makes you smile more. And she makes me feel like it's okay to be sad sometimes, but also okay to be happy. And she never gets tired of my questions. I never get tired of your questions either, Graham protested. Yes, you do. But it's okay. You're learning not to. The casual forgiveness in her tone made his throat tight. I'm trying to be better, Isla. I know. And you are better. We all are. Not everything was smooth sailing. In late October, Graham's company faced a major crisis that threatened to undo all the progress they'd made. A key client was pulling their contract, investors were nervous, and the board was demanding his full attention. I have to go to Singapore, Graham told Tessa and Isla over breakfast on a Tuesday morning. The Peterson deal is falling apart, and if we lose it… How long? Isla asked quietly. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. The silence that followed was deafening. Isla's face went carefully blank, the mask she'd worn for 2 years sliding back into place with heartbreaking efficiency. Okay, she said finally. I understand. But Graham could see she didn't understand, or rather, she understood too well. She understood that work would always come first, that promises about being present were just words, that the brief glimpse of having a father again had been too good to be true. Isla, it's fine, Daddy. Tessa and I will be fine. She excused herself from the table with perfect politeness, but Graham could see the walls going back up, the careful distance returning. Within an hour, she'd retreated to her room and refused to come out. She's protecting herself, Tessa explained when Graham asked what to do. She let herself hope, and now she feels stupid for believing things could be different. But this is different. This is a genuine emergency. Is it? Graham bristled. Of course it is. The company could go under. Could it really? Or would it just be damaged? Would you lose some money, have to downsize, maybe take a step back from being CEO? You don't understand the pressures I'm under. You're right, I don't. But I understand the pressure Isla's under. And right now, she's learning that your business will always be more important than your promise to show up for her. That's not fair. Fair. Tessa's voice was sharper than he'd ever heard it. What's not fair is a 9-year-old girl having to compete with a corporation for her father's attention. What's not fair is her getting just enough of you to remember what it feels like to have a dad, and then having it yanked away again the moment work calls. Graham felt cornered, defensive. I have responsibilities. To whom? To shareholders who'll replace you in a heartbeat if it serves their interests? Or to the daughter who's already lost one parent and is watching the other one disappear into work again? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You have a choice, Graham. You can get on that plane and spend the next 3 weeks trying to save a business deal. Or you can stay here and save your relationship with your daughter. But you can't do both. If I don't go, the company might lose money. Isla will definitely lose hope. Graham stared at her, feeling trapped between impossible options. Everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, was on the line. But so was everything that truly mattered. I need to think, he said finally. Think fast, Tessa replied. Because every minute you spend deciding is another minute Isla spends believing she was right to build those walls back up. Graham spent the day in his home office, staring at reports and financial projections that suddenly seemed meaningless. He made phone calls to board members, explored alternative solutions, sent emails to his team in Singapore. But mostly, he thought about octopuses. Creatures who had to learn everything quickly because they didn't have much time. Creatures who understood that life was precious because it was brief. How much time did he really have with Isla? She was 9 now. In 4 years, she'd be a teenager, more interested in friends than family. In 9 years, she'd be leaving for college. The window for being her father, really being her father, was smaller than he'd let himself acknowledge. Around noon, Charles knocked on his office door. Sir? Miss Isla asked me to give you this. It was a drawing, hastily sketched, but powerfully expressive. It showed an airplane flying away from a small house, with a tiny figure watching from a window. At the bottom, in Isla's careful handwriting, I understand. Love, Isla. Graham stared at the drawing for a long time, seeing not just the image but the resignation behind it. His daughter was giving him permission to leave because she'd learned not to expect anything else. That's when he knew what he had to do. He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. Cancel my flight to Singapore. Set up a video conference with the Peterson team for tomorrow morning. And get me Marcus Chun on the line. I need to discuss expanding his role in international negotiations. Sir, are you sure? The board specifically requested. The board will have to adapt. I have a more important meeting to get to. He found Isla in her room, listlessly arranging art supplies with the careful precision of someone trying to look busy. She looked up when he knocked, her expression guarded. You don't have to say goodbye, Daddy. I know you're probably rushing to catch your flight. I'm not going to Singapore. Isla's hands stilled. What? I'm staying here. The Peterson deal will have to be handled by video conference, and a very capable team of negotiators who don't need me micromanaging every detail. But you said it was important. It is important, but you're more important. Isla stared at him, afraid to believe. What if the company loses money? Then we'll lose money. But I refuse to lose any more time with you. Really? Really? I've spent 2 years thinking that providing for you was the same as being there for you. I was wrong. You don't need another transaction. You need your father. Isla launched herself into his arms with the force of someone who'd been holding back for too long. I thought you were going to leave again. I was going to. But then I realized that no business deal, no matter how important, is worth missing out on octopus facts at dinner or helping with homework or just being here while you grow up. Are you sure? Because if you change your mind, I'm not changing my mind. We're in this together now, remember? You, me, and Tessa. A team. A family. Isla corrected, her voice muffled against his chest. A family, he agreed. 3 months later, Isla stood backstage at her school's winter concert, her hands shaking as she adjusted her dress for the 10th time. She was scheduled to perform a solo piano piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune, her mother's favorite song. I can't do it, she whispered to Tessa, who was helping with last-minute preparations. There are too many people out there. You can do anything, Tessa replied firmly. You've been practicing for weeks. You know this piece by heart. But what if I mess up? What if I forget the notes? Then you'll figure it out as you go. That's what brave people do. I don't feel brave. Tessa knelt down to Isla's eye level. Do you know what I think bravery is? It's not the absence of fear. It's deciding that something is more important than your fear. Like what? Like honoring your mother's memory. Like sharing something beautiful with the world. Like showing everyone how incredible you are. Isla took a shaky breath. Will you and Daddy be watching? We'll be in the front row, and we'll be proud of you no matter what happens out there. Promise. Promise. The curtain went up, and Isla walked onto the stage with the careful dignity of someone much older. The auditorium was packed. Parents, siblings, grandparents, all waiting expectantly. But Isla's eyes found only two faces in the crowd. Tessa, who gave her an encouraging smile, and Graham, who looked like he might burst with pride. She sat at the piano, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The first notes were tentative, careful, but as the familiar melody took hold, something shifted. Isla's shoulders relaxed, her breathing deepened, and the music began to flow with increasing confidence. Graham watched his daughter transform before his eyes. Gone was the guarded, defensive little girl who'd spent 2 years protecting herself from disappointment. In her place sat a young musician lost in the beauty of her own creation, sharing something precious with a room full of strangers. She's incredible, he whispered to Tessa. She always was. She just needed someone to see it. As the piece reached its climactic moment, Isla's playing became more than technically proficient. It became transcendent. She wasn't just playing notes. She was telling a story, painting emotions in sound, creating something that spoke to the deepest parts of everyone listening. When the final note faded into silence, the auditorium erupted in applause. But Isla barely heard it. She was looking at her father, seeing tears streaming down his face, and understanding for the first time that she had given him something precious. A moment of pure joy untainted by grief. After the concert, as families gathered in the lobby for refreshments and congratulations, Isla found herself surrounded by classmates and teachers praising her performance. But the moment that mattered most came when Mrs. Henderson, her music teacher, pulled Graham aside. Mr. Montgomery, your daughter has extraordinary talent. With proper training, she could have a real future in music. She's been taking lessons, Graham replied. I mean serious training. Conservatory-level instruction. There's a summer program at Juilliard for gifted young musicians. I'd like to recommend Isla for their pre-college track. Graham looked across the room at his daughter, who was animatedly describing her performance to a group of friends, her face bright with accomplishment and confidence. What would that involve, he asked. Intensive training, masterclasses with world-renowned musicians, performance opportunities. It's highly competitive, but Isla has something special. Raw talent combined with emotional depth, that's rare at any age. Graham felt a familiar tug of conflicting priorities. Juilliard would mean travel, weekends away, a schedule built around Isla's musical development rather than family time. But it would also mean honoring the gift his daughter had inherited from her mother, giving her opportunities Elena would have wanted her to have. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course, but don't wait too long. Applications are due next month. That night, after they'd celebrated with ice cream and multiple retellings of the evening's triumph, Graham knocked on Isla's door. Come in, Daddy. He found her sitting at her desk, carefully placing her concert program in a scrapbook that Tessa had helped her create. You were magnificent tonight, he said, settling into the chair beside her desk. Really? I thought I might have rushed the middle section a little. I didn't notice. All I noticed was how beautiful it sounded, and how proud I was to be your father. Isla beamed. Mommy would have liked it, wouldn't she? She would have loved it. She would have been so proud of your courage and your talent and the way you shared something so personal with all those people. Mrs. Henderson wants me to apply to some special music program. I heard. How do you feel about that? Isla was quiet for a moment, considering. It sounds scary, but also exciting. Like maybe I could get really, really good at piano. You're already really good at piano, but I could get better. And maybe I could play Mommy's other favorite songs too. The ones I don't know yet. Graham felt his throat tighten. That sounds like a beautiful goal. Would you be okay with it? If I did the program, I mean. Tessa says it might mean traveling sometimes. Isla, if music makes you happy, if it's something you want to pursue, then I want to support that. Even if it means sharing you with the world sometimes. You're not just saying that because you think you should? Graham considered this carefully. 6 months ago, I might have been. 6 months ago, I was so focused on keeping everything safe and controlled that I probably would have said no just because change felt dangerous. But watching you tonight, seeing how alive you looked up there, I realized that the most dangerous thing I could do is hold you back from becoming who you're meant to be. Isla studied his face, looking for any sign of uncertainty. And you'd help me? With the application and everything? We'd help you. All of us together. Tessa too. Especially Tessa. She believes in you more than anyone. Isla smiled, the radiant expression that had become more and more frequent over the past months. Okay then, let's do it. As Graham tucked her into bed that night, Isla looked up at him with serious eyes. Daddy, yes, sweetheart. Thank you for staying. For all the times you stayed instead of leaving. Thank you for giving me the chance to learn how to stay. We're pretty good at being a family now, aren't we? Graham thought about the journey they'd taken, from strangers living in the same house to this moment of perfect understanding. We're getting there. I think Mommy would be happy about that. I think so too. 6 months later, Isla received her acceptance letter to the Juilliard pre-college program. The whole family, because that's what they were now, a family, celebrated with dinner at her favorite restaurant and a shopping trip for the specialized music supplies she'd need. I'm nervous, Isla admitted as they walked through the music store, selecting books and accessories for her upcoming intensive training. Good nervous or bad nervous? Tessa asked. Both, I think. Good because it means I really want to do well. Bad because what if I'm not as good as I think I am? Graham looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the frightened, angry child who'd thrown paint at Tessa nearly a year ago, but a confident young person ready to take on new challenges. The transformation was remarkable, but more than that, it felt genuine. Solid, built on a foundation of trust and love that could weather the inevitable storms ahead. You know what I've learned this year? He said. Being good at something isn't just about natural talent. It's about having the courage to keep trying, even when things get difficult. And you, my dear daughter, are the most courageously persistent person I know. Plus, Tessa added with a grin, if you can survive making 17 nannies quit, you can handle a few music professors. Isla laughed, the bright, unguarded sound that Graham had learned to treasure above any business success. That's true. I was pretty terrible, wasn't I? Spectacularly terrible, Tessa confirmed. And brilliantly creative in your terribleness. I'm sorry I was so mean to you at first. You weren't mean. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how. There's a difference. As they loaded their purchases into the car, Graham reflected on how much had changed. His company had survived the Peterson crisis, largely due to the talented team he'd finally learned to trust with major decisions. His relationship with Isla had gone from polite distance to genuine intimacy. And Tessa had become the heart of their family in ways Graham was still learning to understand. She wasn't just Isla's caregiver anymore. She was their anchor, the person who helped them navigate the complicated emotions of healing while building something new and beautiful from the pieces of their broken past. What are you thinking about? Isla asked from the back seat as they drove home. Just how different everything is from a year ago. Better different or just different? Much, much better different. I think so too, even though it was scary at first. What was scary about it? Isla considered this. Letting myself believe that things could actually get better, that people could actually stay, that I deserved to be happy. The casual profundity of her statement took Graham's breath away. How had he raised such a wise child while being so oblivious to her inner world? You do deserve to be happy, sweetheart. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. I know that now. Tessa taught me. Graham caught Tessa's eye in the rearview mirror and saw her smile. What exactly did she teach you? That love isn't something you have to earn. It's something you give and receive freely. And that families aren't just about blood. They're about choosing each other every day and showing up for each other even when it's hard. 1 year to the day after Tessa had first walked into their lives with paint dripping down her face, the Montgomery family found themselves back in that same marble foyer. But this time, they were welcoming someone new. "This is Sophia," Graham said, introducing Isla's new piano teacher, a renowned instructor who'd agreed to provide supplementary coaching alongside Isla's Juilliard training. "She'll be working with you twice a week to prepare for your first showcase." Isla stepped forward with the poise of someone who'd learned to trust new people, extending her hand in greeting. "It's nice to meet you, Ms. Rodriguez. I'm excited to work with you. Please, call me Sophia. I've heard wonderful things about your talent from Mrs. Henderson." As they headed toward the music room, Tessa hung back with Graham for a moment. "Hard to believe it's been a year," she said softly. "Hard to believe how much can change in a year. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd run away that first day? If I'd let her scare me off like all the others?" Graham considered this. "I try not to. It's too terrifying to contemplate. She would have been okay eventually. Kids are resilient. Maybe, but she wouldn't have been this." He gestured toward the music room, where Isla was already chatting animatedly with her new teacher about different composers and performance techniques. She wouldn't have learned to trust again, or to believe in her own worth, or to see challenges as opportunities instead of threats. "You would have figured it out eventually too. Would I? I'm not so sure. I was pretty committed to my misery." Tessa laughed. "Well, when you put it like that, what I mean is, you didn't just save Isla. You saved all of us. You saved our family before we even knew we were a family worth saving." From the music room came the sound of piano music, not Isla's usual classical pieces, but something new and experimental, a conversation between teacher and student conducted in melody and rhythm. "Listen to that," Tessa said wonderingly. "She's not afraid to try new things anymore. None of us are." As if summoned by their conversation, Isla appeared in the doorway. "Are you guys coming? Sophia wants to hear me play the Debussy piece, and I want you to hear how much better I've gotten." They followed her into the music room, where Sophia was arranging sheet music on the piano. "Isla tells me this piece has special significance for your family," she said. "It was my wife's favorite," Graham replied. "Elena used to play it on her birthday every year. And now Isla carries on that tradition." "How beautiful." Isla settled at the piano bench, her posture confident but not careless. "This is for Mommy," she announced, as she always did before playing the piece. "And for Daddy and Tessa, because they helped me find the music again." As the first notes filled the room, Graham felt the familiar tightness in his chest, but it was different now. Less painful, more bittersweet. The music still carried Elena's memory, but it also carried something new: hope, healing, and the promise of a future filled with beauty. When Isla finished, Sophia was quiet for a moment, clearly moved. "That was extraordinary. You don't just play the notes, you inhabit the music. That's a rare gift." "My mom was a really good piano player," Isla explained. "I think maybe she taught me through genetics or something." "Maybe she did. But what I hear in your playing isn't just technical skill, it's emotional courage. You're willing to be vulnerable in your music, to share your deepest feelings with anyone who listens. That can't be taught through genetics. That comes from experience, and from having people in your life who've shown you it's safe to be vulnerable." Isla looked back at Graham and Tessa, her expression radiant with understanding. "I have really good people in my life." "Yes," Sophia agreed. "You certainly do." If you made it to the end, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. It truly means the world to us. See you in the next one.